Hello everyone, I hope you're all well. The objective of this video is to try to help you with a little bit of preparation prior to the AGM we've got organised for the 17th of September. There's lots of subjects on there, and I appreciate that there's a number on there that you might not have the full background or knowledge of. So the intention here is to try to help you with a little bit of that preparation in terms of understanding what we'd like to discuss more, give you some background information. But the other thing I'd suggest is, if it's possible, if you could look to, if you have any thoughts or questions following this video, then feel free to either reach out to myself or the administrator. It would be nice to try and answer those questions beforehand to try to make as most efficient use as possible at our AGM. What you've got on this chart here is the list of the agenda items. You'll see some commentary in red against some of the items. Those are items I won't particularly cover here. We'll deal with at the meeting itself. The final point I wanted to make before moving on to the next chart is around the guidance with regard to proxies. As you all know, and as I certainly experienced, we lose the best part of an hour at the beginning of every meeting whilst all the proxy votes are collected, collated and registered and everything like that. So in an attempt to try to reduce that amount of time, if you could look to follow the guidance that is in this chart, if you're not able to send, that would be greatly appreciated. Thank you very much. Okay, let's move on to the next chart now. So this is agenda item number 2 on our AGM. It's a chart that I've actually used before in a previous video update where we talked about the outcome of our last financial year ending the 28th of February this year. So I'm just going to very quickly summarise the situation here. This should just be a case of signing off on these accounts for year ending the 28th of February. Our income was 335k. It was actually lower than budgeted for, because we hadn't realised at the time that the increase in community fees would be the second quarter in the year. So as a result, we didn't collect a full amount that we set the budget for. That said, we still had an outturn of 15.5k positive, independent of not collecting all the fees at the new rate. That's translated to a slight improvement in our assets situation. We're up from 108 to 123k, with 69.5k of that being cash at bank at that point in time. We've also stated at a macro level that our intent is to maintain our macro contributions at the same level as they were last year. The charts on the right hand side very simplistically show that we're managing to maintain our cost management at a good level here. We've seen significant reductions in both costs over the last few years overall, and on some of the key line items there that contribute to those costs. Reduction in charges for maintenance gardening services, and a number of other items. They just all help contribute to where we are at the moment, which is in a more controlled position with regard to our expense. Okay, so that just should simply be, I hope there's not too many questions on that, should simply be a case of recognising we've had a relatively stable position and we're now able to sign those accounts off and move on to look at this year. So moving on to the next. This chart deals with agenda items 4, 5 and 6 on the AGM. In essence, what we're looking to do here is move to a forward-setting budget position rather than a retrospective budget setting position. In other words, our financial year for the last budget was set, ended at the end of February. We're now clearly in August, September, and we are running without an approved budget. That's really not new. It's where we've been for quite a number of years now, and it really relates to the challenge we've had around numerous kind of administrative changes over the past years. We've ended up with a situation where we are setting budgets retrospectively, and clearly that's something we don't want to be doing. So the objective of this AGM is to look to get to a position where we are setting forward-looking budgets rather than retrospective budgets. So in order to be able to do that, we'll be looking to run the current budget through until the end of this year, 31st of December, and then start the new calendar year with a fresh budget. Now, the intention through both of these periods, both the remaining 10 months of this year and next year, is to run the budgets at the same level they were last year. So no increase in fees, no change in overall budget. Now, clearly that gives us a bit of a challenge because staff costs went up by 3.5% last year. We know that staff costs account for approximately 60% of our overall costs. So in order to maintain a budgetary position along the lines of last year through next year, we need to be doing other things to try to manage our overall costs. I believe it's practical and possible to be able to do that. Clearly, it means continued focus on our cost and our spend, and it also needs recognising that there will likely need to be some form of increase in January 2027. But for the time being, we're looking to keep that same community fee contribution going until that point at least. Okay, so this is by far the biggest topic that I'm going to cover on this video update. It's in connection with our rehabilitation and painting project. There's a lot of detail here. We've sent out the quotes we've received from the various companies we've been working with to accompany the documentation for the AGM. But my view is that without me at least trying to give you some background and context and information as part of this update, it will be very difficult for you to interpret what those actual quotes mean. So hopefully this will help you understand a little bit more about what we've been through, the approach we've taken, and how we work with technical architects and engineers from a due diligence and selection process perspective. I do appreciate that even though I'll do my best to try and explain everything here, it's quite possible you will have other questions, and please feel free to reach out to our administrator or myself if you have questions that I can hopefully clarify for you. What I will do now is take you through a bit of the approach we've taken and give you a little bit of background. So back in June, as you're aware, the plan was to have an EGM to cover this topic. Unfortunately, two of the three companies we were engaged with at that time, a week beforehand, it became clear that we weren't going to be able to progress with. One, because they'd just signed a very large contract and didn't feel they could handle our work alongside it. And two, one of the companies was not very responsive in terms of responding to us in a timely manner, providing us the information we were requesting, and looking to charge for things that others weren't looking to charge for. So we decided to drop those two companies and unfortunately cancel the EGM. And we then re-engaged with a further two companies. So that's taken us to the point we're at now, and we're in a position now to be able to make a recommendation to you. I recognise completely that that's a recommendation. So from a proxy, from a voting form perspective, you're free to make your own assessment, have a look at the information we provide, and make your own judgment in terms of what you believe is the right way forward. I recognise the importance of making that as open and as transparent as possible. So a little bit about the approach to the project. Two phases, what we're calling Phase A and Phase B. Phase A will look to address the water ingress problems we've had and that were reported during winter. It will look to focus on those, resolving those. Clearly they're important to us, and that really revolves around things like rising damp, things like issues with stairwells, and issues with planters. got to say as well, though, that some of the areas we will need to resolve are owner responsibilities first for planters. There will be a need to resolve numerous issues we have in that area. But that will probably be looking to do that alongside the Phase A work. So more on that as we progress. So Phase A, the plan is to fund it without the need for a levy. I'm making an assumption at the moment that it might well be between 40 and 60k for us to do that work. That assumption might prove to be wrong. We will deal with that if that turns out to be the case, but hopefully that's enough money put to one side that we should be able to fund Phase A of this work. Phase B then clearly becomes the bigger part of the project, looking at the overall rehabilitation and painting of the rest of the community. And clearly we'll need a levy with regard to doing that work. So that's how the project is broken down. Clearly what we'll be doing is going step by step through this process with the appropriate further meetings for approvals, etc. In terms of spend. What we're looking for, and we'll talk a little bit about this on another chart in a minute, is to look to agree on the company who we'll proceed with in terms of managing the project on our behalf. If we agree with the company that we are recommending, then we'll be looking at this AGM effectively committing us to spending around about €11,500 in terms of the company's management charge for managing Phase A of the work. Okay, so a little bit more now about the technical architect engineer selection process that we've been through. I mentioned earlier that we had two companies that have dropped out. However, we've engaged with a further two companies. These companies have presented their proposals. We've performed a level of due diligence on those proposals, and we're now in a position to make a recommendation based upon that. I'll take you through the detail with regard to how we've been through due diligence and arrived at that recommendation on the next chart. Okay, let me now try to provide you with a little bit of information with regard to how we went about the due diligence and getting to a point where we could recommend an engineer who to proceed with. So first of all, we've had a team that's been led by myself and it's consisted of past presidents and the architects from the social club involved in the evaluation process. And when we received all of the proposals from the companies we've been working with, I then went out with a set of 22 questions back to each of those companies, and those questions together with their responses are attached to the information that's come out with the calling of the AGM. So you can have a look at what kind of questions we're asking, and they performed part of our due diligence process, did the answers that the companies provided to those questions. Once we'd got the feedback from the companies on the questions, I then went ahead and selected myself the sites that I would like to visit from a reference perspective, to see work that the companies had managed previously to help us make our assessment too. We went on to then view those sites. Not only did we meet with the potential companies again, I also asked for their clients, i.e. administrators or board members, presidents, vice presidents, to be present as well. And where we had that situation happening, we spoke privately with those individuals to get their feedback as part of the evaluation process too. In addition to that, I also then came up, or following that should have said, I also then came up with a scoring process by which we would look to objectively mark the three companies that we were assessing. That scoring process involved marking each of the companies for the way in which they had answered the questions. We regarded that as them providing us a view on their knowledge and experience they had in this sector. We also looked at providing additional scoring marks for what we got out of the reference site visits, discussions with the clients, administrators, board members, etc. Also, some additional marks were made available to team members from an overall point of view. So that was if something wasn't picked up by the other three elements, then if they felt that there's something material that should be recognised, then there's the opportunity with justifications for additional marks to be awarded for overall competence. And clearly, finally, the most important but not the overriding element of the assessment was the price in which the company was looking to charge. And you'll see against each of those 4 points on this chart, there are percentages. So those are what the weighting percentages that went into the decision making. 35% for knowledge and experience, 45% for price, 10% for reference site visits, and 10% for any overall competence marks. So that was the scoring process we went through. What effectively happened was each team member went through and scored the 22 questions individually. I mixed those answers up, so it wasn't possible for team members to easily see who had responded to what, so it was a blind response just to improve in terms of objectivity. I then added everyone's scores together, which came up with an overall score, which was then ranked from a 3-2-1 perspective, where 3 was the highest and 1 was the lowest, and then those weighting factors I've talked about above were then applied to that ranking to come up with a final score for each company who had responded. So that's the process we went through. Okay, so let's talk about outcome of those assessments now. What we can see in the top table here is down the left hand side of that first column, each of the 4 scoring elements are referred to together with their weighting factors. Then you can see in each column you've got company A, company B and company C with scores against each of those elements and a resultant ranking. That resultant ranking is then multiplied by the weighting factor to give you an overall score, resulting in company C having the highest overall score and therefore being the company we recommend. Now let's have a look at the detail from a pricing point of view in terms of how we came up with that ranking for the pricing element of that assessment. You can see again we've got a row for each company there, and what we've got is various assessments of the pricing that they have proposed. Now it's important to say at this stage that this industry tends to work on the basis of management charges, so the charges for the engineer, being based on a percentage of the overall charge of the work. So it's been we've needed to actually come up with some assumptions about what the work estimate might well be in order to be able to compare the various prices from the engineer companies. We've made an assumption that the phase A actual work will cost 40k, so you'll see that 40k in the phase A columns, and then if you look at the right hand columns, the phase B columns, you can see that we've made an assumption, 3 assumptions actually, assuming that the work costs us 200k, 300k and 400k in order to be able to come up with a comparison. That's allowed us to then use that information to make a recommendation from. So what you can see overall is if we look at column C at the bottom, which is our recommended company across all 4 of the areas we've made the assessment on, you can see that the overall cost for their phase A is €9,400, which is actually more expensive than company B. But when you take into account, if we look at the right hand side of that table in the salmon colour, when you take into account the approach they take in terms of inspection and the cost there, together with their lower management charge, then across all 3 example costs of work, 200, 300 and 400k, then the overall cost is significantly lower than the other two companies. So that is the breakdown of the pricing element of the overall assessment. That just plays into the one element of the four that we've built this recommendation on. And to be clear, our recommendation is that we proceed with Company C, Arquitectura HM2. Our commitment at this point in time, as a result of making that decision, is if the works in Phase A came out as 40k, then it would be a cost of 9,400 euros to us. It's no further commitment than that, because the engineer's first job would be, having done the inspections, to go out and seek quotes from contractors to do that physical work. Once those quotes have come back, then the decision on approval to proceed would be subject to a further meeting of owners. And that's the same for Phase B as well, that any approval to proceed with physical works would be dependent upon contractors quoting for the work to be done, and us deciding, based upon a recommendation from the engineer, who to proceed with. Okay, I'm going to stop on that subject there. I appreciate, as I say, it's really quite complex. I hope it's given you some level of insight, but please feel free, if you have any further questions, if it wasn't clear in any particular area of what I've gone through there, to reach out before the AGM, and I will do my best to make sure that we're able to answer those questions for you. So let's move on to agenda item 9 now, which is really a kind of a supportive agenda item associated with the rehabilitation and painting project. This is all about looking to understand what further problems we might have with the first floor terrace drains that are a community responsibility. We've already fixed over the past months 2 or 3 of those issues that have resolved a number of water ingress problems. We have a few more that we're looking to resolve in a similar way. The intent of doing this is to remove those items from the scope of the overall rehabilitation and painting project, and hopefully save ourselves some money as well by doing that. So what this proposal is all about is spending an amount of money to do a full investigation of the terrace drains, to understand whether we have any further issues that need to be resolved, and looking to resolve those issues before the rehabilitation and painting project begins. Let me talk about the cost a little bit here. So it says 4k to inspect and up to 6k to repair. That might seem sort of like some odd numbers, but we do have around about 80 drains to inspect. They would need to be inspected using cameras, and I'm making an assumption in this costing here that we might have 10% of those drains to physically do some form of repair on, and using the cost of the repair work for the drains that we've fixed just recently, that's where the 6k comes from. Now, I want to be really clear on this. Once we've had the inspection done, what we wouldn't necessarily do here is go ahead and physically do that work. It might well be, based upon the inspection says there's too much costs. There is maybe more than 10% of the drains with an issue. And the last thing I want to do is put at risk our ability to fund Phase A through our existing assets. So if it was clear that it wasn't the right thing to do after having had the inspection done to proceed with this repair work, because it put at risk our ability to fund Phase A, then we would reconsider that at that point. I hope that makes sense. So let's move on to the next agenda item now. So whilst this again talks about drains and inspections, this is different to the previous item. This is more around maintenance of our existing sewerage drainage systems under buildings. Our previous president, as a result of needing to do some specific repairs under a block, the contractor who did that work also identified that we had a number of other similar issues. Now that work wasn't progressed at that point in time, but clearly if we have problems with our sewerage drains under our blocks, we need to understand what those problems are and whether it's appropriate to look to fix them in a short time frame or not. So again, the commitment here is at this point in time to do an inspection at a cost of no more than €1,500. At that point in time, once that inspection comes back, dependent upon what it says, to then spend a maximum of €8,500 fixing the problems. If for any reason the estimate for that work again is in excess of 8,500, or overall when you put this work together with the other work we're looking at from a previous agenda item point of view, it puts at risk our ability to fund phase A of rehabilitation and painting through our existing assets, then we will reconsider excuse me, we'll reconsider whether to proceed with this actual work or not. So realistically, the key approval here is around going ahead with that inspection. Okay, final two agenda items I'm going to give you a little bit of background on. And to be fair, it's our administrator that will cover the detail of this point, so it's more for information from my perspective to give you a little bit more context. Both myself and Judith Dean, the president of Phase 3, earlier this year received burofaxes from our previous administrator, Guadal Fincas, from Jose Luis Perez Granados in connection with a claim he was making for legal fees that he has not been paid for during his tenure as our lawyer. We are taking legal advice on this in terms of whether it is or isn't something we feel we should be paying or not. And as I say, Chelsea, our administrator, will provide you with more details on this at the AGM itself. Okay, so final point I want to cover in terms of this background update for you. Clearly, the subject of the social club is very important to us all, and I know a number of you will have questions to ask. So the objective of this item is to have it on the agenda with an intent to understand a little bit more about what the owner's current plans are, what our rights are potentially in terms of change of use, what the reactivation of the 1999 licence might mean if the owners decided to take that approach, and what we believe are the current situation to be with regard to parking. Our plan is to make sure that we enter the AGM with a joined up position with the owners of the social club, so that we're all at the same place and we're able to have a sensible discussion in terms of where we are and how we move forward. So that's it in terms of what I intend to cover in this update. I appreciate that's 27 minutes of a video. I hope that you do have a chance to have a listen to it beforehand, whether you are or aren't able to attend the meeting itself. I hope this will inform you in terms of any decisions you want to make either at the meeting or by providing your proxy or voting directly and sending that information to the administrator. So I hope it helps. Any questions, as I say, please look to reach out beforehand. The more questions we can answer before the meeting, the more effective and efficient our meeting can be. Thank you very much. I'll close the update there.